Oh man, I think this is going to be a lot of fun. There's a blizzard going on outside right now. It's been snowing for days. I'm sort of holed up inside. I've got my coffee and I'm going to sit here for as long as it takes to bitch about all these different Tekken character designs. I can't wait, but I'm going to lay down some ground rules first. I'm going to be rating the characters based mainly on two things. The first one is visual design, so just what the character looks like in a picture basically. And then the other one is what they look and feel like inside the game, so in terms of animations and style and personality and things like that. So I'm not actually talking about balance today, and I think that's important to point out. It's not a tier list in that sense. There are so many characters in this game where the opinion of them is shaped heavily by the bad balancing associated with that character, and I want to try and get away from that a little bit and be a bit more objective. You also get no bonus points from me at all for being, in quotation marks, iconic, whatever that word means these days. But for example, Nina doesn't get any points for being a Tekken classic who's been in all the different games. Her design has to stand on its own two legs, same as everybody else. I didn't make this template, it was made by someone called Tokahoshi, so thank you to him. All I've done is put names in for the tiers, and then I've added one more tier. For some reason I felt like 6 was the right number. We might add or take some away as we go along. But yeah, let's dig into these designs. I think we can get the completely obvious out of the way right now without any elaboration, but with Miguel done, I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way up. So the first character we need to talk about is Zafina. And you might think that I just want to put her at the very top right away because, you know, I love this character. Let's talk about the good first. Zafina has a lot of really great striking silhouettes when she's standing in Scarecrow or she's down in Tarantula or Mantis. It looks visually interesting and unique. There's a lot of beauty and smoothness with her animations, and I also think that the update they did for her in Tekken 7 is one of the best redesigns of a legacy character that I've ever seen. So all of that is fantastic. But Zafina loses a lot of points for me because she taps into two old, in my opinion, very boring and tired character tropes. And this might come up with a lot of characters today because originality is really big for me, and especially when you play Japanese games, there are these stock characters and stereotypes that show up all over the place, and it gets very tired and overdone. With Zafina, like I said, I think she taps into two. First of all, she's the fortune teller character with a crystal ball who talks about fate and the stars and stuff like that. We've seen that even in many other modern fighting games. There's Viola, there's Menot and Rose. Even though Zafina is the coolest out of all those characters by far to me, she loses points for that. The other one is even more difficult to forgive because it's one of the most overdone and tired tropes in all of Japanese media, and it's the cursed or evil power hidden inside a limb, you know, an arm or an eye, or just inside the character in general that spills out when they are in a desperate situation and need to power up. And it's so overdone. We have it even in Tekken with Devil Jin. There's an evil version of Ryu. And when I was a kid and watching anime, didn't Naruto used to have like an evil fox dude inside of him? Didn't Ichigo have a similar thing? You know, it's absolutely everywhere. With Zafina, I will say I think they did it quite well because in Tekken 6, her story is she guards this temple and there's like an evil god thing inside of it. And when Azazel dies at the end of that game, he kind of turns into this crystal core kind of heart thing. I think that's what she's carrying and using as a crystal ball now. When characters in the cinematics of Tekken 6 pick that ball up, you can tell it sort of corrupts them and turns them evil. And so the question in the story becomes, what happened to that ball thing canonically? Well, it makes sense for Zafina to take on the responsibility of carrying that, but now that she's doing it, it's slowly sort of mutating and corrupting her body, which works. You can tell that they've thought about it, you know, which is great. But because it is a bit of a trope and because she has two tropes, I have to demote her from the absolute top tier and just call her a great design, even though it's one of my personal favorites of all time. Next, we have Yoshi, definitely a character who feels more original, even though he is a ninja, which is also kind of overdone, but he's not your average ninja. I'll start by saying that I think the fish look, deep sea creature, bioluminescence thing they went with for him in 7 is amazing. It's my personal favorite look that Yoshi has ever had. I like it even more than the iconic, again, whatever that word means, look with a green beam sword that he had in Tekken 3. I like it even more than the dragonfly look of 4. I think he looks great. The colors have beautiful contrast with the white and the pink and the blue. It just really works and becomes visually appealing. But one problem I have with this modern version of Yoshimitsu is, think about the Tekken 3 version that everybody loves, the one that they borrowed for Street Fighter Cross Tekken. He has a dark design for the character and then a bright green sword. And what that means is you can always tell where the sword is in relation to the character. You can tell if he's attacking using his fist or his body, or if he's using the sword. Right now, Yoshi's swords are dark, they don't light up anymore, and he has 2 of them. And it's almost completely impossible for me to tell, especially on a low visibility stage like the volcano stages, what he's doing with his hands and where his swords are. Is he putting one in a scabbard? Is he pulling the scabbard out? Where is everything in relation to everything else? It becomes completely muddled for me these days. Maybe I'm just old. The other thing with Yoshi is that he used to be have kind of goofy and silly animations, but have a really serious undercurrent to him. You felt like he was a very serious and capable ninja who just had weird looking moves, but then he has had this clownification where he's more and more of a joke character, and I think that's kind of sad. I'm not a huge fan of that. You hear people say that with Yoshi, you win and you're the genius, or you lose and you're the fool. And that kind of implies to me that the person using him isn't really in control, which isn't a great feeling when you're playing the game. So because of that, Yoshi is also going to go in the great category. But what a classic. Next we have Xiao Yu, and we talked about tropes. There's another one that you see a lot that they call the China Musume, or the China girl. So you've got a dress with a collar up on the throat or the neck, the classic Chinese collar. They always have either 2 buns or 2 tails on the hair, a really chipper and up personality, and a loud voice. And there's Cloudberry Jam, there's all these different versions of this character, Chun-Li and so on. I actually think that Xiao Yu does very little to add flavor to that concept. In the older versions of this character, they actually did a little bit more, because there was a fun Pippi Longstocking kind of thing going on with her, where she was extremely powerful but didn't really know it. She kind of wanted to fuck around and play with toys and go to the theme park. And I think in the story, her teacher was Wong, this character who we still want to be in the game. And he said to her that if you just stopped being so silly all the time and took Kung Fu seriously, you would be like a complete monster. And then they took that, and she gradually turned into more of a generic love interest character for Jin, who's just pining after and loving him and depressed about him, and he ignores her and treats her horribly in return, which is another kind of boring trope. It's so sad that they went that direction with her, because it makes her more boring. On the stage, I think there are some really interesting and cool silhouettes with Xiao Yu. I think Art of Phoenix is really creative and cool. I like the way it looks, even though I don't like playing against it, obviously. But again, we're trying to not think about that. So because of that, she manages to end up in the uninspired here, and I think that's a really good word to describe her, actually. And I'm sorry, because now I'm starting to take these legendary characters and being mean to them, but I have to be honest, this is my opinion, grains of salts all over the place. Steve, okay. For me, the character to compare Steve to is the Street Fighter character, Mike Bison. It's the character that we call Balrog in the West. So you've taken this real world fighter, Mike Tyson, you changed 1 letter in the name to Mike Bison, and you just make a slightly heightened, more fantastical version of him to put in the game, adding very little as far as I can tell. Compare that to Steve, who's much more of his own thing and his own character for a boxer. I think That's good. I also think with Steve, this idea of Tekken having 4 attacking buttons, one for each limb, and then having the leg buttons do completely different things for a boxer because he's not allowed in his sport to kick is really great. The fact that they managed to come up with and execute that well is impressive to me. Now, I like watching boxing in the UFC and stuff like that, so for me, a lot of the boxing stuff that Steve does looks kind of cartoonish and silly, but then again, maybe it has to for an over-the-top game like Tekken. If he was a very realistic boxer, then it probably wouldn't be that interesting to look at. So Steve gets high marks for me. He's a little bit overplayed and a little bit annoying, but I think it's a great character design. It's just, you need to have that plus this completely magical X factor for me to put you at the very top. Now, Shaheen. People call this character boring and uninspired a lot. Is he really? Well, excuse me. First of all, visuals. There's actually a lot more going on here. I think Shaheen means bird of prey or hawk or eagle. And if you look on his shoulder, that gold thing is actually the shape of a beak or like a bird. And he has a crest of feathers over that shoulder as well. And then when he fights, he does a lot of aerial stuff. He jumps in the air. There's a bird theme going on with him. So there has been, thought gone into this character. But the problem is when you start looking at moves and move properties and animations. So think of a generic category of Tekken move right now. The 13 frame down forward 1, the 15 frame down forward 2, the 15 frame hop kick, the orbital, the slide. He sort of has all of these generic move categories in a kind of bland incarnation, and he doesn't look too dramatic when he fights. His main stance is him sort of leaning forward a little bit. Miguel also leans forward a little bit, but that stance is just a lot cooler and more visually striking. So for visuals, just on in a picture, in a photograph, Shaheen actually gets very high marks for me and deserves to be pretty high, but because the move list feels uninspired, I have to put him in the uninspired tier. Okay, Paul, this is another kind of interesting one because he's known for being the moron gorilla, and you see these characters sometimes in Japanese games. They're big blonde idiots with red clothes, the colors of fucking McDonald's, and they hang out with an Asian character who's better than them. Ken, Paul can't do backflips like Law can do backflips, but back in the day, Paul was actually considered one of the most, and I'm not talking about in-game, I'm talking about like the lore of Tekken, one of the most powerful martial artists in the world. I think he has canonically won the King of Iron Fist tournament, so he can keep up with the Mishimas. He's this hyper dedicated, extremely powerful fighter. And then, he has a bit of a silly goose personality and hangs out with his friends, which I think is fine. But he became kind of like Yoshi. There was a clownification of him. And the fact that he has these giant power hits just makes him feel even more of an Unga Bunga gorilla. But I think there is a bit more to Paul. I think they should explore the grappling aspects of his character a little bit more. He manages to claw himself into a slightly higher tier for me. Panda is going to go straight in total shit tier. I don't hate the idea of having goofy animal characters in this game as long as there are a few of them. That's like a flavorful aspect of these Japanese arcade games that I really like. They have that element. It feels very arcadey to me when I see Kuma, and I kind of love that. But Kuma is the character, and then Panda is the palette swap who adds nothing and just looks slightly worse but takes up a space in the roster for no reason. So I have to put that character down here. Next we have Noctis. Now, for Final Fantasy characters, as far as I'm concerned, the ceiling for how good it can get is actually extremely low. I don't think Final Fantasy has good character design at all, but the reason for that is that it's so obviously geared towards teenagers with the hairstyles and the outfits and the belts and the zippers and the melodramatic story and voice acting and everything. It's very, very appealing to a younger audience. And when I was a kid and played, Final Fantasy X, I thought it was amazing and creative and had a great story as well. But I'm a little bit older now and it's starting to look very silly to me. The spiky overstyled hair that definitely wouldn't stay that way 2 minutes into the kind of fight that they have all the time, swinging around swords that would weigh like 10 times as much as the character, but they're swinging them around like they're toothpicks. With Noctis, he's also one of the least cool, I think, Final Fantasy characters, because he's kind of an annoying, shitty brat. Now, I don't know, but I think in the story of his game, he is supposed to be an annoying brat, and then part of his arc is that he learns to be less that, which is great, but that we don't know that if we only see him in a fighting game where he has a couple of voice lines and sounds like an annoying cunt. So, because of that, for visuals, he goes very low for me. The only reason I'm not going to put him in the bottom tier is that I think his projectile, the 4-2, is very clever design. I've said before how this is the move that opened up my mind to the possibility of projectiles being a balanced, integrated part of Tekken. I didn't believe that could happen before I saw that move, so for that, he gets a lot of design points, but annoying to look at, annoying to listen to. Nina, for me, is not a good character design at all, and I'm sorry if that's controversial. I think this is one of the most aged characters. If you look at her idle animation and the way she moves, it looks terrible. Her arms are extremely stiff. She just has these like rigid hands with her rigid arms, and when she's punching, it's kind of like she's just chopping cabbage with them. It looks horrible the way she animates. Like, all the moves look completely fucking terrible because it's aged poorly and it's very old. Now you could say that's why, but if the game has been going for decades, right, is there any excuse why there hasn't been an update to the way this character animates? Why can't she look better? I think it looks completely awful, on top of the fact that it's just kind of the action lady in the skin suit, right? Now, the idea of taking that character, putting her in a wedding dress, burning some of that wedding dress off to reveal what she actually is underneath, because she has grenades and guns strapped to her thigh, is really clever and interesting and fun. I think it's a great idea. So, based completely on her outfit in this specific game, I'm going to put her in bad. If she didn't have that, she would probably go at the bottom for me. Negan is going to be a difficult one because he's the only character who's a real person, and that's why he sticks out, and there's Uncanny Valley stuff with him. I haven't watched the show. I know the actor because he's in a movie that I really like. He's in the Watchmen adaptation, the movie, and I think he's great in that too. Obviously a very charismatic performance, and one of the main reasons people enjoy that show. I read a lot of like horror comic books. I read a lot of like Dark Horse stuff. I've read some Walking Dead. It's kind of a different character in the comics. He's more of a jock and less of a joker, if that makes sense. But this in-game version of him, gameplay wise, I think it's extremely good. I've said before how it's my favorite guest character design. I think now that the stance is fleshed out, it's really great. And second maybe only to Miguel in terms of, you know, feels good, sounds good. Hitting with a counter hit move with Negan feels amazing and is extremely satisfying. It's difficult for me because he's not really a Tekken character. He's an attempt at putting a person in this game. So I can't put him any higher than good. But from a gameplay perspective, I think he's near the top. Okay, so with Raven, it's going to come down to a question of whether you prefer this or the older version of Raven, which was based more on the Wesley Snipes version of Blade, which is another comic book that I've read and enjoyed. I like the Blade character. I enjoyed the old version of Raven, but I think this one is much more interesting and visually striking. I love what they did with the hair. We're finally in an age of video gaming where you can make good-looking like locks like this that fly all over, and then they even gave her those silly scarf things that flap around as well. I think the gameplay design is really appealing. The only thing that knocks a couple of points off for Raven for me is the fact that she has the cyber ninja trope sort of attached. You know, she reminds me of Raiden from Metal Gear Solid. That kind of a character shows up a lot lately, but she's definitely an interesting take on that thing. The cool thing about Marduk is that, you know, I like martial arts and I watch the UFC and stuff, and he's kind of the he's the most informed by real modern martial arts, and I think it's time for fighting games. They shouldn't lose their, fantastical, fun and silly goose core, but it's time for them to at least be inspired a little bit, I think, by what is actually going on in modern, real, functional martial arts. So it's cool that Marduk has that a little bit. He's not a real MMA fighter, but he does do things like a double leg takedown, and then he mounts you, and then you have to guard against him from the bottom, and he can hammer fist you from the top and stuff like that, which is very similar to something you would see in a real cage fight. So that part of him is cool, and I think there's not that much going on with him visually apart from that. He's just a big, boastful guy with a beard. But if he's going to be a slightly more realistic character, maybe that's cool. They try to give him a bit of a splash of color in this version with the teal jacket to make it pop a little bit, and I think that works. It contrasts well with the sort of brownish orange of his skin and beard. So I honestly think this is a really cool design. I'm tempted to put him all the way up in great. I mean, the idea of having a three-way mix-up on the takedown where you have to pick a direction, I like that, but I also don't like it because I don't like the idea of stopping the game to do quick time events. That's the reason I don't enjoy King's multi-throws. In principle, I'm sort of fine with it, but having an action game where two people are playing one another, and then one has the power of stopping the game and forcing the other person to play a quick time event is kind of weird and ruins the flow of a fighting game match to me. But it's also interesting to have that three-way mix-up sort of thing. So I'm going to put him in great for now. With Chloe, this is such an interesting topic, right? Because the idea is so good that this could easily have been one of the best character designs in Tekken ever. I'm going to have a drink of water before I talk about this. Sorry. So if you'd never seen Chloe, but somebody came to you with this idea, we're going to put a dancer in Tekken, like a shuffle dancer who does a lot of kicking, and instead of having just frames where you have to have a specific perfect timing for a move, we're going to have rhythm frames where you press buttons in a rhythm, and that gives the moves extra properties, and the character is going to wear headphones and listen to music while she fights. That's such a great, fun idea. But then the first mistake they made is they went in the Japanese idol direction. And the reason I don't think that's great is I don't associate Japanese idols with creativity at all. And these people work extremely hard, sometimes work themselves to death, literally, but they're working at being perfect, famous people, looking beautiful, people that you should buy posters of and imagine being in a relationship with, to love and idolize. It's not really about dancing and not really about music. They never make their own songs. They are created by corporate committees. So are the choreographies, and then they practice extremely hard at nailing that, but it's not their creative energy giving birth to these things. And the other thing is, many times they can't even really sing. There are many instances of these famous idols being shown singing in real life, and when there's no playback or autotune, they can't actually even hold a note. Some of them are probably amazing singers, but it's that kind of a world. And so if you're going to have this dancing character, you see these videos where somebody goes into an alley with a camera and puts on headphones and has massive bass, and then just goes crazy with these amazing choreographies and moves that they've come up with, and there's so much energy and creativity in that, and that's so cool. And compared to somebody on stage doing something over rehearsed that they didn't come up with, I think that takes away so much from it. And then the other thing is that they made her the cat girl for some reason. It doesn't really make sense when you think about it, because Chloe, when she's fighting, doesn't really do anything cat-like. There's nothing feline about her compared to the way Menat walks in Street Fighter. That's a cat-ish character who has actual cat themes going on screen, but with Chloe it's just tacked on in a weird way. They gave her big fluffy mittens and then made her one of the highest damage characters in the game, seemingly for no reason. Doesn't really make sense to me either. So it's such a wasted opportunity. Imagine if she had her headphones on as she looked more like maybe, Master Raven wearing Julia's outfit or something like that. And you could hear, if you turn down the game audio, just the faint thumping of the bass going in her headphones. That would be awesome. So this could have been the greatest thing ever, but it's not. It's a huge missed opportunity because of the creativity of the concept. I'm not going to put her at the very bottom, but she barely makes it out. Lily, however, is going to go straight in the bottom tier because I think this is one of the most boring and uninspired characters I've ever seen in my life. And I'm sorry for how harsh that sounds, but we've talked a bit about tropes so far. So here's another one for you. The blonde, Western, usually European transfer student in quotation marks. And you can make a checklist here. Drinks black tea out of a white cup with a saucer, gets driven around by a butler or driver in a suit with a long black limo, lives in a gated mansion with vague rich parents, laughs with a hand in front of the face like that. It's an extremely tired and boring concept. And my question sort of becomes, so you take that stock character, and then what do you do with it? What does Lily do to build on that concept to become her own thing? What does she add to it? I would argue that she is that stock character with no flavor added whatsoever. She does nothing. Down to the clothes, they are the most stereotypical interpretation of that character you could come up with, and she does nothing for me. When she fights, she's either flipping or spinning into a flip or flipping into a spin. And it just doesn't really make sense. It's time for them to take, because she's become somehow a mascot of the franchise, right? It's time for them to take her and do something more. She needs to, she's a fine starting point for creating a character, but you need to do something with it. So yeah, she doesn't get high marks for me at all. Leo, I've said this before, is a character design that I really enjoy. I think I'm going to put it in great. The reason it doesn't go all the way to the top is there is a blandness going on when you look at the cutscenes and the dialogue that we have for this character. There's not a lot of charm with the character, but apart from that, they got almost everything right. And if you look at videos of this, I think it's called Baji Quan, but I don't know, style of Kung Fu, it really looks like Leo with the stomps and the shoulders and everything. So I think they got that exactly right, and it's really cool. But yeah, there's just something missing in terms of charm and impact for the character for me. Now, I'm super happy about the fact that Lee and Law come together here, because I want to talk about them together. I want to talk about the idea of putting real life people in a fighting game, So Bruce Lee is this cultural icon who's meant so much to so many people. I used to really like those movies. I will sometimes put on a Bruce Lee movie in the background because I just like what it does to my room. It creates a mood, and it's kind of like a time capsule. It's very beautiful, but you don't get high marks for me for taking that character or that person of Bruce Lee and just creating a carbon copy of him in the game with the same sounds, the same hairstyle, the same clothes, scars in the exact same places, and again adding nothing to it and doing nothing with it. That's boring, and it is a trope because we have Fei Long and Liu Kang and Maxi and all these other characters. But take Maxi from Soul Calibur, not a favorite of mine. I'm not in love with the way he looks, but it is a Bruce Lee tribute character who at least adds some of his own flavor and does his own thing. Law adds almost nothing. It's just Bruce Lee in the game with a side of nothing. So gets bottom marks for me. Lei is a more inspired version of doing the same thing, because now we're talking about Jackie Chan, who I'm a huge fan of. I love his stunt work. It's amazing. Police Story, Armor of God, and then his fighting style also informed more by his earlier stuff, like Legend of the Drunken Master. This move list is amazing because it's so large and diverse. He has 5 different animal stances, and then he has drunk stance and back turn stance and several different grounded stances. So much creativity and energy gone into the character, and I also feel like he at least strays a little bit away from being just Jackie Chan in a game, and for that he goes all the way up into He's great or good. I'm going to put him in good for now. But if we were talking just creativity of moveless design, he would be probably at the top. And then we have Lee, who's another Bruce Lee tribute character who also managed to do more of his own thing than Law. However, all they kind of did with Lee is they took that Bruce Lee concept and they tacked on another trope on top. The flamboyant, theatrical dude who talks about elegance and throws roses. It's crazy that that is a thing, but it is definitely a thing. It shows up everywhere. Think about the guy with the claw in Street Fighter. I mean, it's everywhere. So at least it's not just a trope, it's two tropes tacked together, but I have to sort of put them in this order. But Lee, there's some interesting stuff with the misstep. Gameplay design is pretty good. You could argue that he deserves to be in good, but I'm going to put him here for now. So next we have Lars, and it gets really anime with Lars. I think that this franchise really needed main character close to the Mishima bloodline sort of story who wasn't a sulking, dark, depressed, evil asshole. It needed something that was a little bit more hopeful and a little bit more of a protagonist that we could latch onto. And I'm so glad that they made him Kazuya's brother instead of Jin's brother, because another thing that we see a lot in these games is that there are so many like ridiculously young people, basically children. I think Lily's supposed to be like 16 years old. 16-year-old people are uninteresting, like boring people who don't know anything. I mean, just think about yourself when you were 16, and it's sort of silly that they become these dramatic, heroic characters in these games. So I love the fact that they made him an adult, but then the hair is ridiculous. They probably knew they had to do something spiky because he's supposed to be a Mishima, but then they sort of panicked on the last day and went with something that looks kind of goofy. So at the very least good, maybe great. And also, you know, supposed to be a character for entry-level players to get introduced to the game. And I think he's kind of filled that role admirably. At least he used to in 6 and Tag 2. I'm not sure about him in 7. Okay, Kunimitsu is going to be a really difficult one for me because if you're just looking at the outfit, the colors, the tail, the mask, it looks cool. But I've said this before, this character is probably the only one in the game that physically repulses me a little bit. I'm a little bit disgusted by how weird this character looks and feels when she's walking and talking. She feels extremely young, has a creepy voice like she's on some kind of medication, and there's just something about it that really creeps me out. And I know that's, you know, a personal opinion of mine, and I'm not gonna impose that on anybody else, but that's how I feel. And then she also loses points for being, you know, in the arbitrary daughter tier. She was replaced with she replaced another character who was already doing the job and was fine. There was no reason to create the daughter. There's no reason we couldn't have both, and you can invent a new character who can be, you know, Kunimitsu the second. We've seen that a couple of times. I thought her mother was really cool already and didn't need to be replaced. So and then of course animations, it's like the most cinematic and visually interesting character in terms of, you know, just what happens when she connects with moves and her beautiful combos. So that part of it is beautiful, and then the balance is completely whack, but we're not taking that into the equation. So it's difficult, but I think I'm going to put her down here because, yeah, for me, there's just something, there's an anti-X factor with this character. Just, I don't know, makes me like Tekken less. There's just something about her. Kuma is going to go in the uninspired tier because it's just a big goofy bear, which I don't have a problem with, but they didn't do that much with it. He's just kind of a big brown goofball. They try to give him armor in this game, which I guess is kind of cool. And he also loses a couple of points for move list because he has a lot of overlap with Jack. But I don't hate Kuma. I just wish he felt more like a bear, I guess. King, I don't know anything about like lucha libre or pro wrestling, so I don't know exactly where he draws inspiration from. I know that they had like Jaguar warriors in, you know, Mesoamerica, and he's probably referencing that with a mask. I think it's fun and cool that he doesn't talk. I think that adds honestly a bit of personality. It would be so weird if King started speaking. Now, the one problem I've always had with King is that he's the dedicated grappler of this franchise, and he kind of fills that role admirably, but when you want to specialize a character that much, they really have to specialize in one thing and be bad at others, but King is so all around. Great punishment and range and launchers and combos and everything else, so you will see really good King players who win entire matches without ever relying on grappling. Should it be that way for a heavily dedicated grappling character? I don't know. He's a difficult one for me. I'm going to put him in good for now. Okay, let's talk about Kazuya, and let's bring Jin over here as well, and Devil Jin. Let's talk about these three together. Maybe Heihachi as well. Let's get all four of these, because I think it's a discussion. They relate to one another. Where is Heihachi? Is he even on this list? Can't find him. Maybe I'm just blind. We'll leave Heihachi for now and just talk about these guys. So Kazuya for me is the least interesting out of all these characters and gets the bottom marks because much like Nina, he's aged poorly and has a stiff and awkward look on the screen. He only does about three or four moves, and they all look kind of terrible, especially things like the Hell Sweep. We're just used to that being the move that we have to, look out for and block, and the Vortex and everything like that. But, I found Heihachi good. Let's bring him over. I was looking for him that whole time. Like the Hell Sweep would break all the bones in your body and peel all the skin off of your foot. It looks kind of horrible when you really think about it, and I just think Kazuya is awkward and boring and lacks character in so many ways. I guess the electric, if you really love that, that's a big design aspect of him that's important, but honestly, his jacket is the coolest thing about him in this game, his crocodile skin jacket. And when your jacket is more visually interesting and has more character than you, then you probably deserve to end up in dog shit tier. The one thing that could elevate him to be higher would be if you really, really like and think the Electric Wind Godfist is an interesting move. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I think there are other characters in the game who have better versions, or Mishima characters who have better design. So Jin is kind of an updated and more interesting version of Kazuya. I think that's what their intention was, because they removed Kazuya from the game and they added Jin instead. And he has kind of the same personality and vibe, but he has better animations. He looks more visually interesting. For an old character, I think Jin actually animates really well. Many of his stances and that 1+2 punching attack, the punish where he hits you like several times, it all looks kind of great. His version of the Hell Sweep looks so much better and so much more natural. I think his hook fist looks better than the electric and feels better too. So Jin is a good character design in my opinion, and he's like what Kazuya should probably always have been, but then they brought back Kazuya. Devil Jin, however, is a complete shit tier character design. So my first problem is what you've done is you've taken Jin, who is a pretty good design, and just made him a lot less interesting. So that's one thing. And then think about the devil that Kazuya turns into, and then the one that Devil Jin, the one that Jin turns into. They're supposed to be the same curse, the same genetics, but they look completely different. One is like a more European style kind of naked purple guy, and the other is super anime. I'm almost surprised that they didn't go with only the single wing like Sephiroth, that old tortured black angel trope, which is also really boring. Devil Jin does almost nothing for me, except ruin Jin a little bit, so I really don't enjoy this design at all. And then there's finally a Mishima with a bit of personality, who can be scary and imposing at times and really make you feel nervous, and sometimes be really goofy and silly and make you laugh. Looks visually more interesting than the rest of them, and I was just rooting for him the whole time in the story of Tekken 7. I wanted him to kill the rest of his family and stay on top. He's the one who's dead and gone now, so I think the last hope for me actually having some love for the Mishima family died with Heihachi. I thought he was a great character. Oh, and his wife. So I was sitting in my room in my parents' house back in Sweden. It was in between. I just moved back to Sweden from the UK, about to move to Japan, and I was on YouTube, and this trailer comes up. The first time I ever heard news that there was going to be Tekken 7, and there was this dark red picture with Kazumi's eyes glowing. And I was like, of course, the mother, the missing piece of that puzzle, and she looked like elegant and graceful and calm, but she had this like extremely sinister undercurrent, and it worked so well. She was like regal and scary and amazing. And then they wrote the story of Tekken 7 and they ruined her completely, because her motivation is the most confusing thing ever. You get no sense of whether she actually loves Heihachi or hates him, wants to kill him, whether she likes Kazuya, anything like that. You didn't really get any answers, questions to answers about the devil gene or anything like that. It's just really poorly executed on top of an amazing idea. And then on the screen it sort of comes down to how you feel about the tiger. When she's punching and kicking, it's very similar to Jin. It's that kind of level of cool karate style fighting. And then, is the tiger a gimmick that you enjoy or not? I think it's creative and cool, but it also takes away something from the character, because it makes Kazumi, the person herself, feel like less of a powerful fighter. Because she's not fighting alone. If she was alone and didn't have a tiger, would she be able to keep up with these other fighters, Anybody can win a fight by bringing a fucking tiger into the room. At that point, you can pretty much leave and just let the tiger handle things, because the tiger is probably going to do better than you are, especially if it's as big as hers. But there you go. So she's gone from like being up here for me and then sort of yo-yoed around. I think I'm going to put her in good at the end. There was so much potential. Katarina is going to go straight in great tier for me. I know that's controversial, but I like this character. I like the idea of a powerful kicking character with dark skin and then bright trousers with long vertical lines on them that emphasize the legs, that makes the legs look long and powerful. 444 and 333 are memes, but if you've been paying attention over the years, they've actually changed and improved these strings to where they're actually kind of complex and interesting at this point. And if somebody just does 5 4s for a combo, you should thank them, because they're sacrificing something like 15 damage on that combo. It's not a good combo to perform. Apart from that and the big lows that people hate with her, I think there's a lot of charm, a lot of personality. There's a tradition in Tekken where characters have metal on their hands. They have metal gloves, metal like brass knuckles and things like that. She does her own thing with that because she has metal rings on each finger, which I think is a fun take on that as well. So the only bad thing about Katarina for me is that the hair looks so red on the screen, and that looks terrible. If you look at this art where it's just brown, it just looks so much better than she does in game. And so if we ever see future versions of Katarina, and I have a strong feeling we won't, I hope they improve her hair color. The rest of it just works for me. So with Julia, you have like the environmental activist character, and I really enjoy the idea of putting her in clothes that a person like that would probably wear. A couple of layers and something comfortable if you're outside walking through the woods or something like that. And if you're a person like that, if you camp out, you're not going to comb and wash your hair every day, so it's going to look a little bit more oily and a little bit more, like hers. So that is actually a pretty cool idea, and I like that. The thing where they made her a streamer is kind of annoying to me, though, because we're so inundated by people telling us to like, comment, and subscribe. I mean, I'm saying that as a person making a YouTube video right now, but it sort of feels like old people in an office trying to be down and modern with the kids, and it didn't really work for me. And then her fighting style, I'm not really sure what it's supposed to be doing either. So for me, I guess I think Julia is pretty uninspired. She's also losing points for being another arbitrary daughter, because Michelle was really cool. If you're going to have her daughter in the game, go with the JC thing. and make her more of a female grappling character. I think that would be more interesting than what we got here. Leroy is going to go straight to the top. I think this is just a really good example of how to actually do it, because Leroy draws inspiration from all these different things in the real world, and then he manages to be greater than the sum of his parts. I look at this character and it makes me think of 70s movies and funk and the Wu-Tang Clan and New York and Samuel L. Jackson and Quentin Tarantino movies and Pam Grier, but also about the Boondocks and Afro Samurai and Ip Man, of course. So all of these different inspirations coming together to create a really interesting and unique and fun looking character who also animates beautifully on the screen. If I'm going to be completely honest, my favorite move of his is his While Standing 2. That's a generic move. We have so many characters that just do an uppercut to launch in the air, or the Shaheen style where you crumple stun them and launch that way. He has his own thing where he stands up and then taps you, and then he adds like 4 more punches on top of that, and then that creates the launch, which is really cool. It has a lot of impact. The cane works, the parry works. It's not balanced properly, it's present too much in the playstyle, but it is a fun idea. So Leroy gets top marks for me. What a waste to balance a character this cool this poorly. What an incredible waste. Josie is the Tekken love letter to the Philippines. I will put her in good. I think that's where she sort of belongs. They gave her the name of a famous beloved person from Filipino history. They made her the colors of the Filipino flag. I think it's kind of cool to do a tribute like that, but you also have to be careful because it can become very tacky and tasteless if not done right. I'm not sure if Josie pulls it off, but I kind of enjoy the character. I think she has a lot of energy. Her idle stance, she's kind of jumping up and down because she's kind of angsty, you know, that's her thing. So I like that aspect of her. I think Josie's a fine character, but she doesn't do anything special enough to put her any higher. So Jack is the big robot guy, and we have a couple of those in different fighting games. I think of Potemkin from, is it Guilty Gear he's in? And I think he also has the extending limbs. I think it's a fun idea how you have like shotgun shells or cartridges flying out of his arms, like he's firing his arms like guns and the way they extend. I like the idea of him having these really strange, long, weaponized arms, but kind of shitty and slow legs. He didn't look very interesting in the older games, but then in 7 they decided to give him like a bright green glow with a red mohawk, and people memed on that. I actually think it really works. It makes him look so much more appealing. And if you compare this to Tekken Tag 2, where it's just like camo and it's like gray and green, and he almost blends into the background, he's so boring looking. This is much better. I'm gonna put Jack in good. Huarong I don't really have an opinion on. The eye patch and the hair color in this version of the game with a jacket that doesn't fly off his shoulder for some reason, I'm not in love with it. I'm not in love with the idea of rush down characters, if that's what he really is. Your mileage may vary. It's a difficult one for me to place. I'm not a huge fan of him. I'm going to put him just in the middle because it's so difficult for me to feel anything about Huarong. Gigas, another take sort of on the big robot beast monster giant arm guy. There is some cool stuff in here. I like the tubes. It made me feel like Gigas was an experiment in some lab somewhere, and he was plugged in to all of these things and having electricity or chemicals pumped through him, and then he escaped and he pulled himself free and busted out, and that's why those things are still attached to him. I think that's a cool idea. The 6 eyes on the face with the little serial number and stuff. There's some stuff going on there. And then the idea of having a character with heavy punches who puts you at disadvantage when you block too much and then threatens you with that is a great idea. But they needed to expand on his grappling game to make that really work, and they haven't really done that. So another failure in execution, but I think Gigas, he's great or good for me. I'm going to put him in good for now. Geese is another character where I don't really feel that much. I mean, it's weird to have like the big evil boss dude, but he's like an American who drapes American flags over traditional Japanese buildings. There is kind of a lot of flavor there, and the fact that he's just pure evil. That's the vibe I get from him, where he really enjoys it. Yeah, there's some character in there. So I'm gonna put him in uninspired for now. He's probably gonna have to go in good. It's just that I don't know much or care much about the character. So with Gon Ryu, this is the first time he's ever looked visually interesting, and I like what they did. They went with a sort of sumo monk vibe with the big beads. I almost picture him walking around with one of those staffs, with bells on them like a monk would. Previously, he was just kind of a naked guy in one of those, I call them sumo diapers. I know that's very disrespectful. I actually enjoy sumo, and I watch quite a bit of sumo when it's in season, and it's an amazing sport, and those guys are amazing athletes, and they do real, extremely difficult martial arts things. And I actually think that Gon Ryu has borrowed from sumo in a creative way. Some of his grabs look like the kind of grabs that sumo wrestlers do perform. Some of his palm thrusts and strikes look very similar. So it's honestly a pretty inspired design for a sumo wrestler. But here's the thing: sumo wrestlers can only be a very certain thing. If they lose hair, if they go bald enough that they can't do the traditional hairstyle anymore, they have to quit being sumos. It's that strict. They have to wear that exact clothing. They have to act in extremely limited ways and do extremely limited things. So if you want to do a sumo character, you can't really do that much. You can't have it be, it can't deviate too far from that, which is why he's kind of just a guy, a lot of the time. But then he's kind of an annoying bitch when he's making noises, and he's like a sex pervert who's stalking a woman. Yeah, okay. He goes down because of that. But as a sumo wrestling character, compare him to E Honda, I think he does a lot more. Feng, I think, is a great character design, and I think the look that he has right now is the best he's ever had, with the gauntlets and the metal. He feels powerful and scary. He's so dedicated to his martial art. He only cares about getting better at whatever cost, to the point where he almost barely speaks. It's not like he doesn't speak, it's just he doesn't really have time for it, because he's focused on fighting and winning and becoming better. And you get the sense that you could go into the mountains to this like secret location up, where nobody would ever find it, and this one hermit is just trying to perfect his martial art. That's the vibe I get with Feng, and I think his animations are kind of creative and cool. I think the shoulder is great, has a lot of impact to it, and it's a cool character. He needs his combo game fleshed out a bit though. Fakum Ram I'm going to put in good. He's not going to go any higher. I can't call him uninspired because I haven't seen this kind of giant, super scarred, lightning infused kind of thing before. There is a lot going on there. It's just not very appealing, It's kind of looking at a pile of unappealing looking trash that you've never seen before, so you can't really knock it for originality. The body shape is so weird, but the idea of having strings that sort of cancel into these charge up moves, there's some stuff in there. It's just another failure in execution, especially when it comes to balance. But because we're not considering that, there he goes. Eliza is going to go. It's another surprise, maybe either an uninspired or bad for me, despite the fact that I love this character so much. But let's be honest about it. First of all, tropes. There's something called goth lolly here in Japan. It's the kind of clothing style they've gone with for her. And then she's the vampire, but she has big devil horns, and she's from hell in the story. Is she a vampire or is she a demon? Is she neither? Is she both? And why does she have these generic, boring looking clothes? Like the most obvious Japanese take on what a vampire would wear that you could imagine, this dress with lace. It's really boring. So I would prefer if they took this concept of Eliza and honestly made her just a full-time succubus. I think that's a more interesting idea, and give her, I've said this, the biggest update like I would love for Tekken ever would be goat legs for Elise. I want her to have hooves and a little tail that looks creepy, and I want her to kick people with her creepy scaly or furry goat legs. I think that would be amazing. But if you want to make her a vampire, you have to do something with that. There are so many different things you can do with the concept of vampire. Just think about everything from what we do in the shadows to interview with a vampire to more like monstrous versions of what they can be, you know, like Nosferatu kind of vampires, like in the Masquerade and stuff like that. This one is just kind of generic Japanese vampire with horns for no reason. And then when it comes to her move list that I love using and I like playing this character, she just completely spawns off of and borrows from Akuma. So it's either uninspired or bad for me. I'm going to call her uninspired simply because I think that's the best word for this kind of a design. Eddie is either great or good. I'm going to put him in good for now. The thing with capoeira is that it's a really awkward thing to try and put in a 3D fighting game because I used to take capoeira classes a little bit. I can't do it at all. It wasn't my thing, but they do something, I think it's called Jenga. I think that's what it's called, but the default stance when you're doing capoeira, when you're weaving, you know, with your hands in front of your face, that thing is like difficult to get right in a 3D fighting game. And when Eddie moves and he backdashes so much because he has such a good backdash, it chops that default animation off and makes it look like he's sort of bugging out or sliding on ice, and it becomes really awkward. But in terms of getting that acrobatic style of capoeira and making it into something that works in a 3D fighting game with the kicks and the handstands, I think they did a pretty good job. And then the rest of it is just, you know, balancing and how annoying he is. But for capoeira characters, I think they did well. I probably prefer Christy, and I would love to see her again in the future. Christy was the first capoeira character that they wanted to design for Tekken, but they thought that people would not like her, so they came up with Eddie instead. And then later, they had the courage to actually roll out Christy, so Christy is actually the OG. She's just looked kind of awkward and ugly because of how bad female faces have looked in Tekken for a long time. But now in 7, the characters are beautiful and amazing looking. I'd be really interested to see what a Tekken 7 version of Christy would be like. But I like Eddie as well. Dragunov is another candidate who might go all the way to the very top here. It's difficult and I'm not sure. I think I'm going to put him in great, but I think this character design does a lot. I love the way he stands and feels. There's a mood to him. The different military outfits that he's had all look cool. They work. They're stylish. The mix of these grabs with the really brutal swings and stuff that he has. The silence, you know, he's creepy. Like, you wouldn't want to be around this guy. He feels really scary, and I hope they don't keep on clownifying and making him more goofy, because this is like a creepy ass looking character with great looking animations and throws and sound cues and everything else. I think Dragunov is a complete triumph, and I'm tempted to put him at the very top. He's probably like, there's no order within these tiers, I'm just throwing them in these buckets, but just like symbolically, I'm going to put him along with Zafina at the very top of this great tier, because like Zafina, he's like about to break through to the very top for me. Claudio is an extremely uninspired character. Now, go to Google and just type in witch hunter or vampire hunter and look at how many cool things come up with the leather armor and the hats and the mechanical weapons and crossbows. There's so much you could do. You could go like an Assassin's Creed kind of Ezio thing with it, more Van Helsing kind of vibe with it, whatever you want, but don't make him a boring ass Final Fantasy character with no added flavor and another cursed evil power in the hand thing with bandages and stuff, and like bandages, what is it with bandages and belts and zippers? It's so fucking boring and poorly done. And the idea of like a witch hunting, demon hunting character who's like out to get the Mishimas in the game, in the story, is such a good concept, and then it's just completely pooped on. Fuck this character. He goes down to bad now that he's uninspired, but he's worse than uninspired. The one thing that keeps him from the very bottom tier is that I like Starburst in concept. I don't like it in execution, but the idea of, instead of having a meter where you build bar and then do powerful moves, having you charge up something visual on the character model, the hand in this case, so you can tell whether or not he has Starburst, and then he can do stuff with that, spend it kind of like a resource. It's very Tekken for me because I don't love bars in fighting games. I don't like meter, but if you're going to integrate it with the character model and have it be on the screen, then I think it's a much, much better idea. Fuck Brian. Let's talk about Bob. Is that unfair? This is my least favorite character in Tekken, and it's one of the most beloved and celebrated characters in all of Tekken ever. People love this guy, and I can't stand him. And that's really why I don't know what to do here, because I want to put a tier below dog shit called Brian and let him be alone down there, but I have so much bias that it doesn't make sense. I have to be fair. I'm going to call him uninspired. I honestly think he is in a lot of ways, but in some ways he isn't. There's stuff in there. I mean, I have to give him credit. There is stuff in there, but I just fucking hate this character. I can't stand listening to him and seeing him and playing against him. There's a relationship with Brian there. I'm just going to put him in the middle because that's the most neutral thing I can do, and I'm sorry. Bob is a great design. If we're going to compare and contrast with other fat characters, he doesn't fart, he doesn't burp, he doesn't shit on people, he doesn't eat, big cartoony donuts. He's not Bo Raicho, he's not Birdo or whatever that guy in Street Fighter is called. He's not Rufus or whatever that character was in Street Fighter. He's confident, he's cool, he's an inspired take on what the fat character can be. I think he animates beautifully. I think he has a lot of personality. He's fun to play. Really good hit stop. And interesting and unique gameplay design as well, just from a Tekken standpoint. So Bob is a great design. Asuka is another uninspired design for me. I'm honestly tempted to put her even lower. Like her and Lily, it's just like, how basic and boring can you get and add no flavor to a stock concept. With Oscar, I guess there's a little bit more there with the reversal, and she does have a bit of a story going on, but it's very bland. So, does a character become more interesting and better if you make them look a little bit more badass, put armor on them and call them armor something, Would we prefer armor Claudio over Claudio? Would we prefer armor, I guess Lars has armor. What about armor Josie? Would you like to see armor Josie in the game? She has white hair and red eyes and she talks shit all the time. Is that really sort of edgy, or is it a cool idea? I don't know. I think with Armor King it manages to actually be, despite the edginess, a better design than King. And I'm tempted to say that it isn't because it relies so much on its edginess, but there's a lot to love with Armor King. He really isn't that similar to regular King at all, in terms of gameplay design, less than you would think. Yeah, I think I prefer this character to regular King, and just to represent that, I'm going to put him a tier higher, but they're honestly very close. So, Anna is another kind of uninspired and boring character for me. I think she does a little bit more than Nina, but not that much. Her outfit is probably... it might be my absolute favorite in this entire game. We already had Nina with the wedding thing, and then they did a funeral thing for her, but the color scheme that they went with, the way she looks in her default outfit, it's almost a crime to customize your Anna just because of how amazing she looks when you don't. But she also has aged poorly and has really bad animations. She looks awkward when she's fighting, and then I'm not sure I love the idea of a character that has to rely on low launching mix-ups to be able to compete. I would love for her gameplay to go in a different direction on top of that. Elisa is a trope. It's the robot girlfriend. I guess there's a bit of flavor with the chainsaws and the weapons that pop out, but we've seen this so many times before as well, even in other fighting games, especially the anime ones. This is very anime. Her current look is much better than her old one, where she had the flowers in the hair and the pink and blue dress. That looked horrible to me. I think the colors were awful and the whole character looked like shit back then, and now she looks so much better, so that's really great. And with Akuma, I mean, it's almost sad to end on a non-Tekken character, but if you think the Hell Sweep looks awkward, think about the Tatsu and how fucking stupid that really is. I mean, it's a relic from very, very old games that were very limited, but he doesn't like jump and get any momentum into that spin. He just starts levitating and then spinning like a spinning top at a fixed speed. It's so unnatural and awkward looking, it doesn't really make sense at all. And he's just kind of, constipated kind of looking demon guy in the basic gi, which is the most boring like look you could go with for a typical fighting game character. Paul had it, all these characters have had it in the past, and I think you need to do a little bit more if you want the character to look interesting. So Akuma is honestly a pretty uninspired character as far as I'm concerned, but there's a lot of flavor in there with the writing on the back and the raging demon and everything else. I have no idea how long I've been talking for, and I've definitely been rambling and I've lost my voice. I had a lot of fun. I'm going to save this image because I want to come back to this and see like how my view of these designs evolve. And if there is a Tekken 8, imagine getting to come back and see, what's happened with all the new updated versions of these characters in the future. I will say that many of the most beautiful and best incarnations visually of the Tekken characters that we've ever seen are in this game. It's true of Miguel, it's true of Zafina, it's true of Yoshimitsu, it's true of Lars, and I could go on. It's true of Elisa, for example. But there's a lot of generic Japanesey anime trope stuff going on as well, and less and less as time goes on, actually. So I'm very hopeful for more interesting looks in the future, and I really want to find out who that last season 4 character is, even though I've promised that I won't buy it in protest to the way current Tekken is currently being balanced. But that's by the by. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think. And again, I'm sorry if I really bashed one of your darlings here, but it's just opinions and it doesn't really matter. Thank you so very much. I'll see you guys again very soon.